if I have to explain to someone or try to explain to someone what rock and roll is with one song, I would play that song.
Welcome to Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Welcome back to Musing. Got my brother on the line.
How we doing?
Good. So, 25.
This is not fun.
No, I thought I actually had quite a bit of fun with it. So we're on episode 25, and y'all might just sit back down and take a break, because this is going to probably be a long one. We try and keep them around 45, 55 minutes, but I have a feeling this one might go a little bit longer. So let me set the premise. So we looked at a few of the quote-unquote top rock music songs of blank, and we were not happy with them at all. We looked at Rock Archive, we looked at Ranker, we looked at Planet Rock, we looked at Rolling Stone, and Loudwire, and a lot of those lists were
standardized.
Yeah, or they fit within a certain time frame. Like, it was just not like 1971 to 1982, and there wasn't much room for new stuff. Or if it was new stuff that we're not 100% in the scene like we were when we were in high school and in college and later years. But we still listen to new music, but we didn't feel that those songs that they'd put on for the new music even fit. And I'll give you my point of view, and then I'll let you give your point of view as well.
All right.
We took a list of what we thought were the top 25 songs of rock and roll since Elvis played on TV in 1956. January 28th, 1956, he made his debut on TV. So we took what we thought would be the top 25 songs of rock and roll from then on. And when we did that, we kind of took a lot of our biases out of it, a lot, and I said it didn't say all, I said a lot. And because there's some songs on my list that I think the bands deserve to be on there for a song, but I don't necessarily like that song by them. But I knew that would be something that was an influential song in rock history, and put our list together. So that's kind of my take. What was your take on it?
My take on it was, I had to consider myself an actual rock critic.
Yeah.
And this is my list, much like it's your list. There's a break point where, at least I found, there's not a lot of newer music on these lists because of longevity. Well, Hotel California sold 12 trillion albums. Yeah. And it's because it's been around since 1977,
Well, and spoiler alert, I don't actually consider that a rock song.
I don't either. I was using it as an example.
No, it's just interesting you'd mentioned that one song because I struggled with it. But we'll get into that.
Stairway to Heaven, pick one. Those songs a lot of these lists are based on longevity by their influence, because you can't how can you consider the influence of Greta Van Fleet when they've released an EP that's been out for less than a year?
Yeah.
To me, it's one of the best songs I've heard in the last 10 years, but you can't consider it on a list of the top 25 songs of all time, just simply based on longevity. Rock songs of all time, because of longevity. And that's where I struggle with a lot of this, because 99% of my list is 90s or before. I mean, I had trouble finding songs that were influential, or the best rock songs of all time when you put up, something from, say, Pearl Jam next to the Beatles. It's this was extremely difficult. That's why I said it wasn't fun. Because there are a lot of bands that I had, obviously 25, you have to omit, not only songs, but entire bands, almost entire genres, because, I mean, the Eagles had some rock songs, I mean, that could have been on this list, but the Eagles aren't on my list.
Yeah, they're not on mine either.
Because literally it's flooded. I would think of one song or one band, and I would think of 4 other songs and 10 other bands that could go that way. So this was incredibly difficult. So I had to take some of what everybody else thinks out of it, and I didn't standardize mine. I made it. This is what I consider the top 20. What I personally consider the top 25 rock and roll songs, and obviously we'll go through them, and then we'll be able to defend them to some extent, or at least the highlights as we go. So
yeah, and I think one of the last points you made there is that it is ours, but we also grew up through a lot of this. I mean,
sure.
Not pointing out our, age or anything, but, we grew up through the 70s, 80s, and 90s with music and beyond, and we've stuck with rock music throughout that history, and we've also stuck with rock music past that history. I mean, again, we don't, it's not our dive. We don't dive into new music every week and find new bands, but we still listen to rock music. We still listen to what's going on contemporary. And yeah. I think that is still our list, but it is not unfounded. I think, again, we grew up in that era, and when we were listening to the radio, songs that made influence on us were the songs that made influence on the world as rock. I mean, we're not just throwing a song out because we like it. We're throwing a song out because it was made an influence.
Right. Some of that, well, I agree to most of that. Some of it, I had to take some of the worldly influence because the radio play, we've talked about this, and we've talked about this with other people, and that there's a level of, the radio, we included Pete Pardo in on this as kind of a, what do you think, or what are your top 25, just kind of ballparking. And one of his comments was, like that some of these songs I never want to hear again, but you can't deny their influence.
Right.
Well, I didn't put my list together that way. I put my list together I started with, if I thought of a song that I liked, I thought of a song by a band. I thought of that band and what was that band's best song, and does that play into, listenability, just because it didn't sell or wasn't played on the radio as much as, one or the other, just because, of whatever corporate intricacies or radio or airplay or pay for play or whatever it is. I kind of tried not to let that influence. I mean, you can't deny the popularity of certain songs but perusing your list briefly that you did, we honestly, we held our lists close to the vest until just before going on or recording this.
We did.
I saw a few that I was baffled by, and much like I'm sure you are of my list. So I'm excited about it, and if you don't like it, send us yours.
Yeah, exactly. No, and reasons. I'm all for lists, but send us reasons too. Send us why you think a song should or should not. And
because we made this reason because all those other lists were made and they didn't give any reasons. So.
Yeah, they gave a little bit, but it wasn't what we felt was good. But let me set the stage though. I did find one site that basically went through the top Billboard 100 of every single year from 1956 to current. And I went through all of it, and one of the things I found was it seems like rock always had its foot in the stirrups and getting on the horse, and the horse always took off. So when the quote for Elvis Presley coming in from Wikipedia was, after making his national television debut 60 years ago on January 28, 1956, more than 60, I guess, Presley shattered viewership records, challenged social norms, and helped bring the rock and roll revolution into American living rooms. And
Fair enough.
And I looked throughout the years, and like in 1964, the Beatles had the 1 and 2 spots on Billboard Top 100.
Wow.
And then in 78, it swung back. The Bee Gees had 3 of the top 10 hits. Top 10 hits that year, 3 of them were Bee Gees songs.
Disco.
Yeah. Then in 1980, you had an explosion. You had Blondie, Call Me. You had Another Brick in the Wall. The year before that, there wasn't a rock song, what we consider a rock song, in the top 50.
Really?
Yeah. Then a Sway, and then the 88, you had Sweet Child of Mine, you had Pour Some Sugar on Me, so you had kind of like the end of hair rock, beginning of hard rock, swing. Yeah. And then in 91, you had the top song. No. Well, just before it, you had More Than Words, Everything I Do, High Enough, Winds of Change. So you had rock bands.
Ballads.
Yeah, you had rock bands creating power ballads that, technically were rock. And then in 1994, you had rap. Rap just was a huge upswing in sound. So, I just took a sampling of what was coming out. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my list from 25 to 1, and then I'm going to kind of give you a chance to comment on what you see that stood out and what you see that you agreed with.
Right.
The list I sent you, actually, the darker orange one was switched out for something, so I'll read it, verbatim for what I got. But I was reluctant to put this song on the list, but 25 was Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss. 24 was the Seven Nation Army by White Stripes. 23 was Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash. 22 was Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. 21 was Head Like a Hole, 9 Inch Nails. 20 was Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith. 19 was Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd. 18 was Fight for Your Right to Party by Beastie Boys. 17 was U2, The Streets Have No Name. 16 was Joan Jett, Love Rock and Roll. 15 was Black Sabbath, Paranoid. 14 was the Foo Fighters, Best of You. 13 was Green Day, Welcome to Paradise. 12 was The Kinks, You Really Got Me. 11 was Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine. 10 was Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth. 9 was Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. 8 was Metallica's Enter Sandman. 7 was The Who, My Generation. 6 was Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. 5 was Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze. 4 was Rolling Stones, Satisfaction. 3 was Elvis Presley, Jailhouse Rock. 2 was AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long. And 1 was Chuck Berry, Johnny Be Good. Before you start, I have to say that I struggled with 2 songs on this list. And those 2 songs were the Guns N' Roses song, because I really think that Paradise City was the more influential song on rock and roll. But I think Sweet Child of Mine was what put them on the map. And I really struggled with sticking Enter Sandman before Stairway to Heaven on the list. But okay,
the only thing I got out of that whole list was our number 4 song was exactly the same. That was it.
Scary, isn't it? So fire away. I mean, just unload.
No, it's tragically valid, because, and I'm looking at it as I'm talking to you, or trying to, I guess, the White Stripes Seven Nation Army is undeniable, and it's probably perfectly placed on the list low, like 24, because it's become a stadium anthem at football games and so on and so forth. It's kind of monumental to that. The Clash, undeniable. So you replace, I see you replace Janis Joplin with U2, which Janis Joplin wasn't even a consideration based on her folk it was more folk than rock to me.
That was hard because at that point in time, that was the boom. The
No,
rock had kind of drifted. Yeah, rock kind of drifted back enough. But that's why I think Buffalo Springfield made it so high on my list, because at the time that folk was rock, for lack of better ways of saying it, I think that the world was in, definitely the United States was in an uproar with the war and with being against the war, and the war being such a big thing, Vietnam. And Buffalo Springfield, while I don't consider to be hard rock, was the representation of rock for that time, because it was angst, it was angry, it was in your face about what was going on with the world, and it was still a little bit of rock. But that's why I think that fit, because that time frame really didn't have much in the way of the hard rock era stuff.
Right. I mean, I don't have, it's, again, this is, I don't know if you were expecting me to pick it apart. There's nothing on here that I disagree with as far as could be on the, I mean, I went over, I guarantee 100%, well, maybe not Janis Joplin, but 99% of these songs I went over and considered. Green Day for a 90s punk band to be that high up on the list is, I would balk. But and again, I mean, once I think maybe, I don't know if I should read mine like for a side by side comparison, and then it'd be easier to pick apart or
good idea. Let's do that.
Or challenge. But looking at some of your options, I'm assuming those in the gray are options.
Yeah, those were kind of like my
honorable mentions.
Yeah, and kind of like my 25 through 30, because I think they deserve to be on there somewhere, but they just didn't fit. And I think you and I both went about this the same way. We basically wrote down the list of all the songs that we thought would be on there, and then kind of narrowed it down. And so, well, actually, you know what? Before you actually read yours, let me explain a couple.
Sure.
Why Green Day was so high is bands like the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, they didn't really get notoriety while they were out, like while they were producing albums, while they were making music. They didn't get a huge lot of notoriety, and punk was really hard to pass off as rock at the time, even though there was a huge underground following of the sound. Sure. I think Green Day took that and put it in directly in the spotlight. And again, why I put them so high, even over songs like Paranoid by Black Sabbath and Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd, is because it actually took a genre that was already there and moved it, like completely moved it. I think a lot of these bands, even like Nine Inch Nails, that they were doing something revolutionary. Nirvana was doing something revolutionary. They were changing a sound. I think Green Day took a sound that was already there, already out there, already big in the underground, and changed it into something that was palatable and that people could, accept, and then started digging into that, but going back and listening to the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, Stiff Little Fingers, stuff like that people just didn't listen to when it was out, unfortunately, unless you were, heavily into it. So that's why it ended up climbing so high on my list. Right.
No, and again, I just struggle with the pop. I mean, they were, I don't know, kind of a small, I don't want to say a blip on the radar. I mean, obviously that one acoustic song that
Time of My Life.
Yeah, dear God, if I hear that song again.
Well, but that's what I was saying is they weren't just a flash in the pan. They made a lot of really good songs that people listened to and bought albums for on a regular basis.
Oh no, it's hard to argue. It seems awfully high on the, like you say, when you put them above a Black Sabbath as far as all time. That's the only argument I could come up with is longevity.
Right.
It's hard to argue something like Green Day over, I'm not denying their impact or their album sales or anything like that, but it's longevity. I mean, Black Sabbath still gets heavy radio rotation. Green Day, they still play Green Day, but they play, in the elevator, they play that Time of Your Life or whatever song. But, excuse me, that the fact that it's so high on your list is the only thing that really stuck out to me. And again, not that they don't deserve to be on the list, but maybe placement is, again, some of the only things that I would have take issue with. Metallica even being that high on the list, and try to deny their impact.
Oh man, and I think, but again, that's another band that took a genre with the Black Album of metal and made it, something that was mainstream rock, and I think that's
palatable or radioable.
And I think that's where, I mean, it means exactly what you're trying to say, but I think that's what I went for with my list was what made rock and roll. What turned metal into rock and roll? What turned punk into rock and roll? And, even when my number one and your number one are off by a little, but, when I actually listened to all these songs again. Once I finished my list of 25, I kind of just perused through them, and
so did I.
Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry is
it's hard to deny.
It screams the future. I mean, it just basically says,
No, I mean,
we're taking we're taking blues and we're going to turn it into rock. And that's what a lot of bands in the 70s did, and that kind of got progressive in the 80s, and I think that's why Metallica lifted so high above even songs like Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven, because while Stairway to Heaven is a rock and roll song, it doesn't fit the traditional rock and roll song for me.
And see, that's what I tried. Maybe I certainly didn't misunderstand the assignment this time, but I tried to, when I thought of rock, okay, you picked Green Day and you picked Welcome to Paradise. You picked one of their faster, heavier songs, not, Time of Your Life. If you're going to pick a band like Green Day, you should pick a song that's influential or affects rock and roll to that standard, to which I think, obviously, Time of Your Life is their, by far, I would say it's by double-digit millions better sales than the rest of it, but
I don't think that's a rock and roll song.
Exactly. And that's why, I don't even take issue with it. My thought process was, if I'm going to have Green Day on my list, they're going to have their biggest thing is going to be a rock song.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And that being said, some of mine might not even stack up to that. Like even.
Well, go ahead. You know what? Go ahead and read yours backwards. Go ahead. Just lay them out.
All right. Number 25, I had Let It Go by Def Leppard. Number 24, I had Barracuda by Heart. 23, I had The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. 22, I had Ace of Spades by Motorhead. 21, I had Fight for Your Right by the Beastie Boys. Number 20, I had All Shook Up by Elvis. Number 19, there's a discrepancy on the list I sent you. I had Closer by Nine Inch Nails. Number 18, I had Are You Gonna Go My Way by Lenny Kravitz. Number 17, I had Holy Diver by Dio. Number 16, I had Stranglehold by Ted Nugent. Number 15, I had One by Metallica. Number 14, I had Tom Sawyer by Rush. Number 13, I had Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer. Number 12, I had My Generation by The Who. Number 11, I had Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf. Number 10, I had You Really Got Me by The Kinks. Number 9, I had Rebel Rebel by David Bowie. Number 8, I had More Than a Feeling by Boston. Number 7, I had Sex Type Thing by Stone Temple Pilots. Number 6, I had Sweet Leaf by Black Sabbath. Number 5, I had Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd. Number 4, I had Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. Number 3, I had Help by the Beatles. Number 2, I had Black Dog by Led Zeppelin. And number 1, I went back and forth for the past 3 weeks and settled on Let There Be Rock by AC/DC.
Yeah, and I'll note that you did have
Whole lot of Rosie
marked out, which I actually struggled with the AC/DC one to put in there too, because I am a huge Bon Scott fan, but you
Shook Me All Night Long is not even up for debate.
But
when I went through this list, and I'm just a quick explanation on my number one, and it's probably odd to do it that way, but my explanation on my number one pick was, since I remember listening to music, I've listened to a lot of different bands, a lot of different genres, a lot of different songs. I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it. And Let There Be Rock is, and I hate it's ridiculous. It's almost a cliche. It was, again, why I went back and forth, because it's almost a cliche. But when I think of rock and roll, and I think of rock and roll bands, and I think of the best rock and roll song in the past, I think of that. I think of I went kind of differently. If I have to explain to someone, or try to explain to someone what rock and roll is with one song, I would play that song. Because, I mean, it doesn't get more simplified and more confusing at the same time, that this is what it was supposed to sound like. And again, you could have picked just about any AC/DC song. I'm being facetious, but
yeah,
I mean, AC/DC solidified basic rock and roll. You always described it as four on the floor, bag over the head, punch you in the face, just rock and roll songs. But they had some cake. Go ahead.
There's a reason why a lot of bands, through the 80s, 90s, and even now, reference them as influences immediately. I mean, there's no joke. I mean, people don't reference, Green Day or,
right,
The Who a lot anymore. You get, we're a rock band. We listened to AC/DC when we were kids, and that's kind of like the first thing. Yeah. Right. I mean, and that's why they're high on my list. And, I'll kind of do the same with yours. Actually, let me step back though. So let me count. So our number 4 was exactly the same. Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. You also had Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which I had. You also had, what else? The Kinks, You Really Got Me was not in the same spot. These are just, matches. My Generation by The Who. What else? There's something else on there. Fight for Your Right to Party by Beastie Boys.
Right, and see, I struggle with that, because that was, I mean, other than No Sleep Till Brooklyn, they are basically a hip-hop rapper and hip-hop.
Well, so they technically I struggle with weren't. That. I mean...
yes, they started as punk, I know, but that song defined the 80s, kind of, mid-80s.
Well, and that song gets played on the rock station a lot.
Oh, yeah. No,
so that's what bled it over for me. And, I did put it kind of high on my list. Well, I guess not really. I put it at 18, but you had it pretty low too, didn't you?
Yeah, 21.
You had it 21. And then... it's weird because we had some of the same bands but different. Actually, let's do that. Let's go to the bands with different songs. We already talked about AC/DC. You kind of explained yours. I explained mine. Why Black Dog on Zeppelin? I mean, I'm not denying the song being, on a list at all.
To me, it was the more complete. I mean, I was, you could have went with rock and roll. I mean, I could have did, Let There Be Rock and then Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin as number 2. I don't know if it's a secret, if it's come out in the past. I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan.
Right.
And Black Dog was the one that I always really liked. It always just seemed like a good rock and roll song. I mean, like, when I think of Led Zeppelin, I think of Black Dog. When I think of rock and roll, and most people think of Led Zeppelin or AC/DC, I think of Black Dog. Stairway to Heaven is much like my number 6, like Stranglehold by Ted Nugent. It's a long, drawn out, mostly guitar enabled song with some singing there, and I don't know. Stairway to Heaven is an epic, undeniable song, and again, we could pick these songs apart based on our personal preference, but you can't deny Stairway to Heaven. But Black Dog was a little dirtier, a little lower,
Well, it jumps in right away. It jumps into rock and roll right away.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's why I picked it over like a Stairway to Heaven, and rock and roll. By Led Zeppelin, I just never. Yeah, it's like.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that one either. But
yeah, I mean, it's a great song. It's again undeniable, obviously, but
I would say that if you told me that I had to pick a Led Zeppelin song from my top 25, but it couldn't be Stairway to Heaven, it would be Black Dog. I mean, I'm definitely not denying it. I was just kind of curious why you went that direction, but I mean, that explains it. That explains it completely. So, you picked Help by the Beatles, and I went a little older school by the Beatles.
Again,
my Beatles didn't make my list because I didn't feel they were rock enough, but I had an honorable mention. I Want to Hold Your Hand, Beatles.
And see, to me, Help was. I mean, you could have done like Shake It Up. I mean, by comparison, at that time, early mid '60s or mid '60s, that was rock.
Yeah, and that was a struggle for me too. Even putting an Elvis Presley song on there. I don't know if we argue the Beatles one because it's technically not on my list. So let's jump to Elvis. You put All Shook Up, which I don't. I really had to struggle with it. Elvis is the king. I mean, there's no denying it. And
see, and again, that's a relative term, I think,
right?
Because it's the king of rock and roll. Yes, I agree. I mean, you could have put the king of pop on there too. I mean, because we've talked about this.
I almost had one
we dabbled by Beat It. I mean, is a good quality rock and roll song. I'm sorry, but
no, it is
by Michael Jackson. But Elvis Presley, I mean, I think is on my list or maybe on your list by default because of the moniker King of Rock and Roll. I mean, because
I thought about that and I went back and listened to Jailhouse Rock again, and I'm like, this is pretty much almost a precursor to Johnny B. Good.
Yeah,
it's 12-bar blues turned into something heavier, and if you listen to him sing that song, he's almost screaming in parts of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not, I'm not saying I'm not linking Elvis Presley to screamo. That's not my intention.
No, but he definitely gets into it, and even the live versions of that that song is, I mean, as 1950, whenever when did that come out? That was
somewhere around
that was shock rock. I mean, that was people were losing their minds over that.
An attitude. I mean, that's I think that's why some of the bands made it onto my list. Is I don't. Again, if I could never hear Rock and Roll All Night again in my life, I'd probably be pretty happy. But that was the attitude.
See, I had Kiss on my list as a 25 as a close second, but I had Detroit Rock City because I thought that symbolized more of a traditional rock song than Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think that if you're talking about rock and roll and you're talking about kind of what you were saying with Let There Be Rock, hey, this is what rock and roll is. For me, Rock and Roll All Night is, hey, this is what the rock and roll lifestyle is. And,
yeah,
it's unfortunate that it's, that song, but
the thing that stuck out to me the most, not the bands on the list, but the bands that were omitted and songs that were omitted. I mean, like...
Well, give me 5 year ones that were omitted.
Omitted? Van Halen was one that stuck out. I
struggled with it. I couldn't find...
I mean, being that we just did that, a couple last podcast, it was... I had 10 songs I would have put on by Van Halen. I was like...
Well, I only had one. I had Jump, which, it was only because it was a hit, I guess.
No, well, I mean, there's again, it's hard to deny the influence. But like me, I didn't have the Clash on there, and wanted to. I didn't have. It was a struggle. I mean, weeding out. I put. And the one that I told you, like, Green Day didn't really like. Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer was pretty high up, more than almost halfway up my list. And because of that, the influence of that song, and I listened to it a lot to realize like how much of an actual rock and roll song that is. But that's all he had as far as, I mean, he had, a couple other, rock-ish hits. But I mean, there was a lot of bands that I didn't want to leave off. But there were newer bands too. I mean, like.
Well, I mean, no shock, but I had a Creed song that was bumped.
Creed. I think to me.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I think they epitomized new rock. I think they really kind of brought bands like Nickelback and them into the light early. I mean, they were the tail end of grunge, the beginning of new rock or corporate rock or whatever they're calling it now, post grunge rock. And right. I think that even the song "My Own Prison" is not one of my high end favorites of theirs, but it certainly was something that really hit the scene hard at the time. So. Oh
yeah, early '90s. There it was, mid '90s. It was huge. What, 96, 7?
I have to look that one up, but
like things like, I even struggle with Limp Bizkit, like new metal type of things, like in the late '90s there, that like Nookie, you couldn't turn on the radio without right. hearing that song, and they put out a couple of albums that sold a lot. I mean, there was a huge following before, everybody got to know Fred Durst.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, and then there was like borderline, like Kid Rock. I mean, do you consider, is he rap? Is he country?
I think he fits into the same genre that Limp Bizkit does, and I think Limp Bizkit, no offense, but I think Limp Bizkit did it better.
Well, I mean, but I'm just saying, like, I don't have Queen on my list.
Yeah, it got bumped for me too. And I think it's because I think that when you think about actual rock and rock and roll, and I think Queen was experimental, and it's the same reason David Bowie really didn't make my list.
Right.
I think that the glam scene was huge. I think that they were pushing music in a completely different direction, and it spawned, we talked a couple episodes ago about spawning the Motley Crue's first album.
Right.
Being, teetering on that glam sound, but I just didn't feel like it fit enough into rock that I had to bump it out.
And right. Well, no, you beat me to it. Motley Crue was another one. I mean, Girls, Girls, Girls in '91 or whatever that was. I mean, they still play that. I mean,
yeah. The problem with that time frame is I think Bon Jovi ruled that era. I think
right.
Living on a Prayer was,
Dude, that was an honorable mention, because try not to hear that song even today. I mean, I have contemporary rock, classic rock, and 80s, 90s, and more radio stations playing Wanted Dead or Alive.
Yeah.
And it's a good quality rock and roll song. And am I tired of hearing it? By far. But I mean, it was epic. Was it 87, 88 when that come out? But even Bad Medicine by Bon Jovi is a great rock song.
Yeah,
that's what I said. The omission part of this was a lot harder than picking the actual songs on my list. It was who to leave off.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned it. I actually had Beat It on my list, because I think it's a very standout rock song. But I think, again, Michael Jackson really wasn't known for that. He was the king of pop, and that's what he was known for. And that's why I just don't think it fit on this list. But I mean, I left off, stuff like you'd mentioned before. I left off Hotel California, but honestly, that was a quick omission for me. While I think it's, it's listed as one of the top pop. Well, I think it is number one now. Number one, rock album, selling rock album. I don't feel the Eagles. I think if I was to classify the Eagles, I would actually put them more in country than I would put them in rock.
That's an unfortunate truth. And I
Yeah.
don't dislike the Eagles. I just,
Yeah.
probably the best harmonizing. Ooh, no, I'm not going to say that out loud.
Well, okay, so Black Sabbath, you put Sweet Leaf, I went Paranoid.
Paranoid,
Well, let's start with Black Sabbath. Nobody's denying that they deserve a song on the top 25, right? I mean,
no, absolutely. Yeah, try to leave off Black Sabbath on a best rock of all time list, and I will call you wrong every time I'll call that. So, Sweet Leaf to me was just dirty. It was when I think of Black Sabbath, I mean, I bet they've got at least 10 songs you would recognize.
Yeah, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, NIB. I mean, you can name, a bunch of songs off their first couple albums.
Exactly. Fairies Wear Boots.
Fairies Wear Boots, right.
Any of those. I just love Sweet Leaf. I don't know why.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are cliched. I think Sweet Leaf is just the better song of the bunch, maybe because it's not been overplayed so much as the rest of them, to me.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
But I just, that guitar, man, in that song, I mean, Tommy, it speaks to me. That song is just, it is so vanilla, heavy rock. It's like all power chords and just Ozzy at his peak to me. And you could argue any of them. Again, Black Sabbath deserves to be on the top 25 rock songs of all time list every single time. And you could throw a dart at a playlist and you'd be fine. Sweet Leaf always stuck out to me as it was just a bitchin' song. It was just like, cause I was like, what the hell is going on? Who's that guy coughing, at the beginning? And it's like, what is happening? And then when the guitar hits, like, oh yeah, I like that. Let's go with that.
Yeah, and again, we're certainly never going to deny them on our top 25, and I don't think anybody should if they're making their own.
Right.
But,
so why did you pick Paranoid?
I think it's because it's kind of the same reason I like the Green Day song. Is it jumps right in. There's no, rock should be in your face the entire time, and I think that, I'm a sucker for intros for starters, and that kind of has that guitar laden intro, but it jumps in. I mean, I think that's why I picked a lot of the songs, and I think it's why I had such a pain picking Stairway to Heaven, but I'll relate that back to why I want to fight with you about Metallica. I see one as Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. I think it's a crescendo song. I think it's a build-up song that ends up being a rock song, but I just don't feel it early. I feel it as, again, I'm not denying Metallica or the song. I just felt like that would be the Stairway to Heaven of Led Zeppelin's repertoire of music that would fit on here. And I'm shocked why you picked that over, obviously the Black Album was going to be the more influential album that they had, but Enter Sandman was, again, could you turn on the radio without hearing it, when it came out?
Right, still.
Yeah.
And I think I just liked And Justice for All better than the Black Album.
Well, I think one could have fallen on the Black Album and probably fit in.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. The Black Album to me is, and I'm surely would offend Metallica fans, it's overrated anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
it's good. It's good.
Yeah, no, it's palatable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's palatable. It's just, I didn't think, I don't know why. From the first time I heard it, I never thought Enter Sandman was that great of a song. It was almost like they mailed it in. And I think that was the beginning of the end for Metallica. And I'm speaking purely from my point of view now. That I just think that they started, that Black Album was, they wanted notoriety and radio play so bad because the song you hear more off that is Nothing Else Matters. And I think that's what started whether they needed therapists in the studio or whatever then or now, but I think that I don't think they were in the right place for that album.
No,
I
and
mean,
I think unfortunately that album did two things. It took metal and put it in the mainstream,
yes.
and it also ruined it for the mainstream.
It dumbed it down for the mainstream is how I would put that. Like, I think And Justice for All obviously was the first album after Cliff Burton died. We all know the issues with, editing out the bass, Jason Newsted's bass and so on and so forth. That was the last album with feeling because they were angry. They were mad that Cliff Burton wasn't there.
Yeah.
If you listen to And Justice for all those songs are dark, angry songs. And then it's like, 88, 89, 99, 3 years later, 4 years later, the Black Album comes out and it's like, nothing else matters. It's like, I mean, I get it. I know where they were going. I know why they did it. And they were probably tired of touring for 2 years without stopping and so on and so forth. So they had to get some radio play, and mission accomplished, because I'd say the Black Album sold as much or more in the first couple years than all their other albums combined before that.
And it still is a popular buy for people at this point. So
no, absolutely. And there's a lot of quality songs on there. And again, it's not a bad album. I just think it was the beginning of the end for like you said, it's probably the beginning of the end for mainstream metal.
Right. That's what I said.
They took if you listen to Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning, boy, oh boy, or even Master of Puppets. On contemporary rock radio now, Master of Puppets gets some airplay now, but it's, boy, oh boy, if you listen to Master of Puppets, the song versus, Nothing Else Matters, boy, that's a long, hard fall from grace to me. And that's why I picked one over anything off the Black Album. I didn't want to pick something off the earlier albums by Metallica. I think Metallica deserves to be on the list as much as Black Sabbath, but I didn't want to put something. Once I got to that point, I decided I had to pick a song that I thought would, because they still play one on the radio even to this day too. So,
so let me give you one more I left off my list and kind of get your input on it. So I left the Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys off.
I never considered the Beach Boys rock and roll.
Yeah.
I know that sounds bad. It was like surf rock.
It's so weird because, I think 2 of the 5 lists we looked at had Beach Boys songs on it.
Right.
And I kind of felt the same way you did, that I didn't think they fit into rock, but you just said the words a second ago, surf rock. And that's what it was titled. It was titled that Jan and Dean and Beach Boys, and, even Dick Dale at that point was doing, surf guitar music and stuff. And
right.
I had a hard time omitting it. I really did. I actually, I omitted things like the Doors and the Beatles pretty quickly because of, yes, they're considered rock, but I don't consider them rock and roll as traditional rock and roll. But for some reason, I had a hard time cutting the Beach Boys off there.
And yet we put Pink Floyd on there
that
tried to deny Pink Floyd's influence in rock and roll, but they're not a traditional rock and roll band either. They're pretty much a standalone.
But I think they're close. I think they're closer than Queen was, which is why Queen got cut and Pink Floyd did not. I think Queen was far enough away from it. I think if you listen to a lot of Pink Floyd's, yes, it's mellow, but there's still a lot of lead guitar and rock in their music, a lot of their music. So
yeah, if you're gonna call the Beach Boys surf rock, you'd have to call them stoner rock. They're Grateful Dead, the Doors, Pink Floyd. They're all in that same kind of collective,
Yeah.
Yes, they're rock and roll. But they're definitely a subset or a subgenre of, like AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. That's a different horse of a different color.
Well, and, Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility, we reached out to him to kind of get his opinion as well beforehand and see where he would be. And he sent us a pretty fun list as well. And I think one he was adamant about, I was kind of shocked it didn't show up on either one of our lists. Or did it show up on yours? Did you put Sunshine of Your Love by Cream on there? No, you didn't.
No, but that was a real tough omission to not, because I had a couple songs by Cream, and I'm like, you know what? I got like 6 songs from the 60s and 70s, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to. That's what I said. It was harder to omit than it was to make the list.
Yeah, I think that from my reasoning, I think when I put it down, I actually, let me see if I have my other list, because
My buddy Sean actually, he said, I mean, his like Creedence, he had Fortunate. I think he had Fortunate Son.
Yeah.
Creedence Clearwater Reviver on his list.
But I like, there was 3 songs like Cream, Layla, Cream, Sunshine of Your Love, The Birds, 8 Miles High, and Buffalo
Yes.
Springfield, for what it's worth. I think were the epitome of those that genre at that time. Again, going kind of anti-war and trying to
Sure.
get people to feel good about themselves and to not, worry about not wanting to go to war, or that whole feel of music at that time. It was difficult for me to pick one. And I
Right.
think the line from For What It's Worth of "There's a man over there with a gun in his hand," just it's iconic. It sticks out. And again, I could have honestly omitted all of those songs, because I would say that probably Sunshine of Your Love is closer to a rock song. But I think at the time of what rock was at that time, I think Buffalo Springfield fit it more. I could have actually taken that song completely off the list and put something else in place of it that was more rock. But
Right, and that's things like, did you have Steppenwolf on your list?
no, I did not actually.
See, like, Born to Be Wild could have been on there just as
Yeah.
easy as Magic Carpet Ride, or
I had Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood on my cut list too. So
I did have George Thorogood was a thought process, but I omitted ZZ Top. Trying to omit these again in triplicate. The omitting was much more difficult, because leaving these bands off or putting them on was, I mean, the bands themselves are kind of undeniable. AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, David Bowie, the Kinks, Steppenwolf, The Who, Rush, Metallica, Dio, Elvis, Motorhead. It was a struggle to realize that these bands have, and I started to say this earlier, it's the longevity part of it. Because I picked a song by Stone Temple Pilots from the early 90s doesn't mean that I honestly think Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd, I think there's probably a dozen songs written since then that are way better that should be on the list. But longevity, I mean, you can't escape the power or the recognition, of Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd.
Well, and I think that's why the Foo Fighters song made it for me, is it still gets played on a constant basis on the radio. They've been around for quite a while. I mean, it's staggering when you look at how long the Foo Fighters have actually been around. And they're solidly in rock and roll. I mean, he came through Nirvana into Foo Fighters.
Undeniable.
And same reason. I mean, I don't think it does it really need to be that high on my list? Maybe not. I mean, it's certainly going to be above Rock and Roll All Night, because while Rock and Roll All Night epitomizes, the rock attitude and the rock person that's in rock and roll, I think Foo Fighters has really solidified themselves as a rock and roll band and put themselves out there and made hits. I mean, they've got on the radio on a regular basis, and that song still gets played.
Oh, sure.
It's kind of funny you mentioned a bunch of the songs. Some of the bands that I omitted was, like, I went with Elton John, Saturday Night. Oasis. I was going to put something by Oasis on there because they really slowed rock music down.
Right.
I omitted Marilyn Manson. I omitted Prince. Let's Go Crazy. The Ramones. I'd mentioned them, but I kind of went a different direction with them. Red Hot Chili Peppers. Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart even had some pretty decent upbeat rock songs. But just,
I'm not going to touch that with a
didn't
10-foot pole.
Come on, Maggie May is a pretty good song.
So is Do You Think I'm Sexy?
Hold on. Every Picture Tells a Story. That song's really good.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I think you're right. I think the cutting was really the harder part than the actual assembling at this point. So
right, because I left off like John Mellencamp.
Yeah.
ROCK in the USA. Come on. I mean, or the Authority song. There's so many more that deserve. I mean, we could have done a top 100 list and still been pissed because we had to omit people. And that's why I said. That's why I said this wasn't fun. I enjoy music. I love music, and I love doing this podcast. I struggle with like cutting, like not getting more, because I could have done like a top 25 bands and then give you 25 songs that I like of theirs.
Of each one, probably.
Of each one, yeah. And not even been, not even slowed me down.
Well, and I think that was what we wanted to do, is we've been doing this podcast for a while now, and, we don't do it to make money. We don't do it to get, on somebody else's list of great podcasts or something. I would love that. It would be great to have everyone listening to it so we can get more feedback, but that's what we're looking for, is feedback. We just want to talk about it. We want to talk about music, and to put something like this together, I wanted to be cliche and pick 25 songs for our episode 25, but I also wanted to do that because I wanted to stretch ourselves, because I knew there were going to be songs on our list that probably songs we didn't like on our list.
I tried to avoid that.
I did too, but some of them you have to.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I am not a fan of Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix.
No, I'm not either.
But I am extremely aware of where...
Of his influence and his prowess.
Yeah. What it changed in rock at that time. It's the same reason... where is it? It's the same reason I Love Rock and Roll is on my list. It's because, yes, Joan Jett was, if you look at women in rock from even before that, she basically put that on the map. I mean, Okay, let's hear it.
That's why Heart was on my list.
But I don't see them as rock. Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Barracuda, yeah, but...
Crazy on You? Nothing? Magic Man? No?
I don't know.
Oh, man. Deny me the intro to Barracuda.
I'm not saying that they couldn't make your list. I'm just saying I think that Joan Jett did more for traditional rock than they did. Yeah,
Really?
We're allowed to have opinions, right?
I know, but how many hits did Joan Jett have? 2?
Exactly, though. But again, it's all about the song itself. Like, I don't think.
I love rock and roll. Come on, I'm not even fighting that on the list. It's kind of an undeniable song, but I don't know about top 25 all time.
This is why when I went back and looked at went back and looked at the years and what songs were hits in those years, and realized that rock was really not accepted except for very short amounts of time here and there. When it was accepted around that time frame, Joan Jett was pretty high on the list, and it was both popularity and the fact that a girl was doing dirty rock and not, I think that's where I find the difference. Is I find Heart to be a little more on the pop rock side, and I think her to be really, if you I'm trying to think of the other song by her.
My Reputation.
Nah, but there's another one that is it? I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. If I can remember it, I'll put it on the list. But
see, if I was going to pick Joan Jett, that's what song I would have went with.
Well, but
I Love Rock and Roll is almost like slowed down. I don't know.
But again, you're looking at a dirty rock song. That's a hard in your face rock song. And
Yeah, have you heard My Reputation lately?
that's what I said. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you on that. That I think that all of her songs were that in your face type rock and roll. And for a female to do that at a time was, definitely different than the norm. But I think Heart just took Heart to me feels like they lean more on the Fleetwood Mac side.
Yeah, but I mean, it was earlier than Joan Jett is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Late 70s, 77 or something when Heart was, when I think Barracuda came out there, 77, 8, 9, somewhere.
I gotta check. You make me look.
But I mean, again, this is what's fun about it. I mean, because, you can argue, but I mean, there's no denying them. I mean, it's just personal. Then it gets to personal preference.
Right.
But I agree with you. I mean, Heart's not like this, heavy metal. It is different than, but you could have picked Lita Ford or Pat Benatar. Either. Because they had Pat Benatar is the same way. It's more pop than rock. But Love is a Battlefield. It's kind of a rock song. They play it a lot on rock stations still. It's, I don't know, as far as influential women in rock or hard rock.
So, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
It can't be right. Hold on.
No, I'm not ready then.
Dang it. What song were we talking about? What song were we talking about?
Who? Which one?
The Joan Jett one that you said would have been
Reputation?
Oh, yeah, bad Reputation.
Bad Reputation, yeah.
Joan Jett song. 1980. Yeah, it was by 3 years. So 77 for the Heart song and 81 for the Joan Jett song.
No, I knew. Joan Jett was in the Runaways with Lita Ford back in the 70s. So, and who else? There was some other famous chick in that band that did rock she went punk, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
Let's see. The Runaways were Sandy West, Lita Ford, Joan Jett. Cherry Curry, I think, is the one you're thinking of.
Maybe.
Anyways, but yeah, I think the bottom line is again, now we're talking about preferences. Yeah, and it's always going to fall. It's always going to fall into this list. When everybody puts their top 25 together, there's going to be some preferences in there. I tried to do as much as I could to keep that out, but
right.
It's if you're going to go strictly by numbers, you're going to go strictly by numbers on everything. If you're going to go strictly on feeling, you're going to have to go strictly on feeling on everything. And I think we both got good mixes of what we tried to accomplish here. We got a really good mix of, again, songs that we might not even like, but we knew that they would have to be on the list of top 25, or at least the band. I'm not necessarily saying a song.
Right. I think the band first, and then it kind of goes to personal preference to your song. And that, which reminds me, why did you pick Head Like a Hole by Nine Inch Nails?
I think that at the time there was nothing like it, and I don't think there's been anything like it since, to be honest with you. I think Head Like a Hole, if you go back to Time Frame again, us living through that song was everywhere. You couldn't turn on the radio without hearing that mixed in with Metallica and AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. And I don't think the mainstream rock scene was embarrassed to have that as a rock song.
Right.
But it was a completely different genre, and sort of like punk. There was sort of an underground following of techno sound at that point that he kind of brought into the limelight. But I think he did it with a
electronica.
Wall. Yeah.
No, it was. And see, being that a young Brian Warner was in his band and at times, and you said you left Manson off your list.
Yeah.
I picked Closer because of I guess it's played because it's played on rock radio is the only thing they could fit it into a genre, but it's most certainly more electronica than rock or metal.
Yeah.
But
it's even more electronica than Head Like a Hole. Head Like a Hole.
Head Like a Hole is way more rock, and I could have picked 100 others. I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, but I think Closer kind of stuck out as in 91. It was different. 91, I think. 91 or 2. It was way different, and I would put on that album.
94.
Was it that late?
Yeah, odd, but yes.
Wow, I'd have lost a lot of money betting on that. Anyway, I just think that at that time when the music scene was in such kind of a turd stew, that Nine Inch Nails brought some sort of difference to it. I mean, see if I'm reaching here. I think Nine Inch Nails is kind of the Pink Floyd of the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, I think a lot of bands fit into that, and oddly enough, Dookie actually came out in 93, so you weren't far off with the definition of music. Yeah, exactly. I think that you're right. I agree, and I think that's why I had such a struggle with putting them on there. But I think what they did for rock at the time was influential enough for them to be on my list. But you're right. It's Queen. I mean, it's David Bowie. It's those ones that skirt the edge of rock, that they're right there, that I could have taken any one of their songs and put them on there.
Well, I think they're a genre beater. I really think there's some that overcome that. And I hate to say it, like the Eagles, you can consider them country, you can consider them rock, you can consider them pop.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nine Inch Nails, you can consider them rock, metal, electronica. You know, there's even some. I mean, Hurt. Come on. I mean, what would you call that song? A ballad?
No.
Yeah, a ballad about being addicted to heroin. But I mean, come on. I mean, that's I think there's very few bands that have accomplished what he and that band I mean, I know the lineup changes quite a bit, and has, but for Trent Reznor himself, I mean, I think he forced a hole in music that wasn't there before, and has kind of maintained his foothold on the edge there, that, you know, he peaks in every couple of years or goes on tour, or, you know, puts some sort of album out that's politically charged or whatever. And I think the talent level is still there, but I think he, much like Axl Rose, has struggled to find, you know, that to catch lightning in a bottle twice. I mean, in the 90s it was different. It gave the goth and the freaks something to, you know, to listen to, and a reason to wear their blood red docks again, you know, and I don't know, just to fight the system.
Well, I think, and to tie that back around, if Elvis had looked forward and saw that, would he have said that was rock? I mean,
no,
maybe not. I mean, maybe he would even look at, like, even AC/DC and go, is that rock? Or Guns N' Roses and go, is that really rock? But
no, you know what? I think why he has the moniker, and I think he was a better visionary than people think. I think he was a victim of his circumstances and his time frame, you know, and who was it? The captain, the general, what was his?
Yeah.
Colonel Tom Parker. Yeah. I knew he was some sort of faux military.
But if you circle back to the quote about him, he shattered viewership records, challenged social norms, and helped bring rock and roll into the American living rooms. He was there at the time that TV made everything accessible. Yes,
and I think that was part of his downfall too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is, you know, it fed
into that. A victim of a circumstance where he didn't have the opportunity to progress. They kind of pigeonholed him and made him do beach movies and
GI Blues and.
Well, yeah, I think he was visionary enough to think. I think he would have thought, wow, you know, Pink Floyd, this is visionary. Yeah. Wow, you know, AC/DC, this took Jailhouse Rock to a level I could never even imagine. I mean, to hear Bon Scott wail on Let There Be Rock,
right,
is something that he could only dream of, I think. And not because he wasn't that talented, but because I think he would have appreciated the ability to take what he started, and I'll even admit to that what Elvis Presley started and took it to where we are today, where we're just guys like us are clamoring for quality music. We listen to a lot. We try a lot. We ingest an obscene amount of new and odd rock and metal and even country and even rap and even hip hop and whatever the skirts are of rock and roll. And we try to put it into like something palatable. We're like, that's why when bands like Greta Van Fleet come out, you're like, wow, finally something. Yeah, okay. Even if it's reminiscent of something that we loved in the past, it's something
still good.
It's something better. It's something different because it sounds like that, but it's fresh again. It's that's why I think when Nine Inch Nails comes out, it sounds like a hopped up version of Pink Floyd, or Queen. It comes off as it's reminiscent of what we love, but it's different. So, and that's, I think, what most of us music people clamor for. We can't wait for that next, that next song, that next band, that next thing. And reliving the past, I think, falls into that. We want so bad for it to come back. Why can't they just make good music anymore? And the last part of that sentence, anymore, is we're waiting for that next one. We're waiting for that next
Elvis Presley.
Yeah, for lack of a better example. Yeah, we're looking for that next breakthrough.
Yeah, push to a different, to either a different direction or something that's really good.
Or another level.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And I think that's a good way of tying it up. I think we gave our lists. We put our lists out there. I certainly want to hear what everybody else's lists are. And, there's no place really to go from here on top 25. You could adjust this in 10 years and have 2 different new songs on it, but a lot of these songs are going to stick, period, because of longevity.
And that's exactly right. Yeah.
Maybe at 50 we'll go to 50 and see what else sticks out. That'll take we might as well start on that right now at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
But but good conversation, brother. I appreciate you going through the pain of making a list and talking about it and figuring out where we were, where we lined up and where we didn't. But
well, I said the pain wasn't the list; it was the omissions.
Exactly.
There's a lot of good bands and a lot of great songs that didn't even get mentioned, and I know friends of ours and people that do communicate with us are gonna dump a trainload of songs. Like, why didn't you guys put this on there?
I was gonna say, basically the tweets and the responses are gonna be, why didn't you put quote unquote or blank on it? I mean, it's gonna be that pretty much all, which I'm fine with. I'm perfectly fine with talking with it. So
no, absolutely. That's the other thing I crave, is waiting for that next, one I forgot or didn't think of, or because I hate to say closed-minded as far as we've got a pretty big window, but there's also a lot of stuff that we don't listen to on the norm, that we missed somebody's favorite band and somebody's favorite song, or a song that's really popular. They're like, why didn't we even think about that? So
yeah. Well,
by all means, musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
Yep.
and hit us up.
And we've got a couple good shows coming up in the future too, so stay tuned for those. But thanks for talking, brother. I'll catch you later.
Absolutely.
See ya.
See ya.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, Sybert.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.